Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, window cleaners of the imagination. Get your squeegees ready because we're going to fill your virtual bucket of soapy water with another episode of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And here he is, chamois in one hand, microphone in the other. It's the bloke with a clear view all the way. It's Matthew Dickerson. How are you, Matt?
I am good, but I've got, in addition to the items you just mentioned, I've got a tail that's tucked between my legs at the moment. I did.
That was why you were walking funny.
That's exactly right. I was doing one of my regular interviews. I've got about 8, maybe 9 radio stations at the moment I do regular tech interviews with. And I did one of those regular tech interviews, no big deal. I do them every week, some are fortnightly. But then within maybe a couple of hours, I got an email from a large tech company that many people will be familiar with, but I won't mention the name to protect my bank balance.
Yeah, right.
And they said that I made a mistake in one of the segments that I delivered that particular day. And then I got a phone call probably another hour after that to work out exactly what I'd said that was incorrect from a tech perspective and what I was going to do to address this particular issue. And I was a bit taken aback by it all.
There were some big ears listening there.
Well, I actually said that. I said, well, it's interesting because I'm pretty impressed that you're sitting there listening to my radio interviews. That's right. Now, the reality is it would be some media monitor process they would have that would be listening out for that company name. But the fact that they took the time and effort to send me an email, to make a phone call, I actually thought they were a bit sensitive. And the issue wasn't so much that I'd made a mistake. It was really that I hadn't specifically said which country it applied to. I just talked in general terms. The radio interviews that I do, we haven't got as much time as we have with a podcast. So typically the radio interviews I do are maybe 6 to 8 minutes, maybe some even go as long as 10, but you haven't got a lot of time. So you're really just brushing over, just really touching on some topics. So I don't normally drill down into the specific details, say, in this particular country, this is exactly what's happening with this particular product. It was just a general overview of what's happening with that product. But they weren't convinced. They said, well, you're in Australia. It's not happening in Australia. It's only happening overseas. So you should have been more specific about it happening in Australia. And anyway, so I was in trouble for exactly what I'd said. And again, I haven't addressed it. So I'm probably in more trouble because I said I really don't see any need to address what happened there. But that's at the moment. Maybe they'll roll out their big lawyers and come and...
impressed that they were listening in.
I know.
And they know about you. You're now on their blacklist.
That's right. I exist. That's fantastic.
Wow.
So I've got to be very careful what I say today on Tech Talk because obviously they'll be listening to our podcast.
Well, maybe we can just start dropping stuff like, a Google is 1 to the power of 100 sorry, not 1. It's 10 to the power of 100. And now they've tuned in because they've heard me say Google.
That's
if I start talking about the Amazon rainforest or whatever, are they tuning in now?
Apparently. So what we've got to do, though, is we've got to say something about one of those companies that's wrong.
Oh, okay.
So then I get another phone call and another email to say, you made a mistake on your podcast. You mentioned us. So
if I just mention Stan as just this hobo that lives on the side of the road or whatever,
that's right.
They're not going to care about that.
Well, they might. They might hear the word Stan and that's it.
Okay. All right.
Good.
Well,
so you've got 3 companies chasing me now after what you said. Thanks very much.
There we go. I'm not going to be safe getting in the car. All right. Well, that's one for the conspiracy theorists, isn't it?
It is.
They're listening at all times. Okay. And all right.
And we've gone through the experiment to see whether they're listening on our phones. We're still...
I'm still getting ads for wedding dresses. This is 3 years later. Move on.
So we're still not sure on that one, but certainly they're listening on radio interviews apparently. Yeah.
Okay. Now, looking at the lineup today, we've got some very tasty tidbits for James Bond fans who like their transport unconventional and multimodal. We'll see how one little village in India has taken YouTube and turned it into a money tree. And we'll see why the mining industry has become so distracted by the moon lately. But let's kick things off today with matters of the heart. Now, artificial hearts have been around since the 70s. An impressive piece of engineering for sure. They've always served as a bridge between the removal of a lagging heart and the subsequent refit, albeit as a very brief stopgap in cardiac surgery there. Well, in a significant development, an Aussie man has walked out of the hospital with an artificial heart whirring away and gone about his business in the world for the next 3 months or so. Ladies and gentlemen, did I say powered by an artificial heart? This is one giant leap for mankind, Matt.
He's the first person to leave hospital with a total artificial titanium heart transplant sitting in there, which is pretty impressive. And what I love about this is It was an Aussie invention, and an Australian man was the first man to receive it. There were 5 devices in total they've done so far last year in Australia and the US, but again, it's an Australian invention. And a couple of cool things about it. So the first thing's the name. It's a Bivacor. So I went looking for what Bivacor was from an acronym. So BIVACOR.
Right.
And I expected it to be some fancy long series of medical terms that would feed into that acronym.
Turns out to be some guy's mum's name.
Maybe it was, because I couldn't find anything that would actually say exactly what it stood for. So it doesn't seem like it's an acronym. It might just be a combination. So the best I've come up with so far is BI, 2 ventricles in your heart. So there's BI. VA, maybe ventricular arteries.
Well, you've
maybe.
thrown this one at me. I've got to go away and work on this.
That's
I'm
right.
not going to be able to bring this up spontaneously.
Core is Latin for heart. So I thought maybe they've just chucked a couple of letters together and went, there you go, Bivacor. So I'm still waiting to see what Bivacor is going to stand for or what it means. But at this stage, that's the best I can do. So essentially what it is a titanium heart, and it was an Australian biomedical engineer named Daniel Timms that first came up with the idea 24 years ago, back in 2001. Okay. And he went to the hardware store and bought some pipes and some valves and started playing around. And 24 years later, there we go, we've now got this heart. I hope they've refined it a bit more from there, which obviously they have. The coolest part about it is that rather than a heart, and most people have a vague idea of the heart, it's a pump. It squeezes to squeeze the blood through and relies on valves. People sometimes, when they get a bit older.
That's the sound that you're hearing when you hear the lub dub. That's the valves closing.
That's a good heart noise there.
Yeah, that's what we teach.
and I actually had a friend recently who had some valves replaced because they were leaking. They weren't sealing properly. So when the pumping action was happening, it wasn't all going one direction. Someone was coming back the other direction, which sometimes happens to people when they get a bit older. So he started off with valves, but then they got to the stage where they went, well, it's more efficient if we just have a rotor, because the whole concept is you need to keep the blood flowing through your whole body.
So we've got a biological answer to a problem that's working in our bodies right now.
Yep.
If you're listening to the show, if you're not listening to the show, sorry, won't go down that road. So if you come up with another mechanical advantage, there's no reason why you have to have valves.
No, that's exactly right. So you just want that blood to go through your whole system. So they end up with a rotor, but you have a rotor, well, it's got to be sealed and it's got bearings and it could get clogged up, but it could stop. So they came up with a magnetically levitating rotor, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And you think, well, you really need to make sure you've got power for that to keep it working, but you're going to have power for it anyway. So it doesn't matter. Whichever way, if it loses power, you're in a whole bunch of trouble. Yeah. So that's fine, whatever way you do it. So this rotor spins. It's got no contact with the frame. There's no wear and tear. But at this stage, they're not designed to be in there forever. In this particular case, you mentioned about 3 months, so 105 days. He had the heart in for, walked around, did whatever he needed to do.
3.5 months or so, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then came back in and actually got a heart transplant. So that was the objective, was to keep him going. Because for many people, the way they do that is they put them in a hospital bed and say, wait there, we'll wait till we get a heart. Now, unfortunately, the way we get a heart these days is we wait till someone maybe has a car accident.
Doesn't need theirs anymore,
Yeah, that's right. So we have about 100 heart transplants a year in Australia at the moment. Unfortunately, there's still about 1,300 deaths on our roads at the moment in Australia.
Oh, look, and Australia is and this is another permutation of that problem, is that if you need a new heart and you're in Perth, but the car accident there's potentially got a donor that fits has occurred in Brisbane, they've then got to fly that heart, and they've only got a small window of time to get that heart while the heart's still viable to get that. So that there's no time to be lost whatsoever in transplanting to people who live a long way from where the accident occurred.
And when you consider that in this country we have about 5,000 deaths a year from heart failure, we've got a lot of gaps there. But I mean, it's fantastic that we've got heart transplants, but for someone that received one, they have fantastic, a new lease on life. But then you start to think about it, and hopefully they don't think about it too much, that someone else tragically died for them to be able to get this heart. And I say car accidents, there's other ways that people get a heart as well, but that's obviously the most common, because you've normally got a young, healthy person with a good heart who suddenly isn't using it anymore, unfortunately. So there's a whole range of things there. Initially, the idea is to keep it in there to get people for that gap. But obviously, long term, it may be that they say, let's get it in there long term.
let's keep it in.
Yeah, let's
and
keep
if
it
you're
in.
looking to get a little bit more longevity out of your life, I mean, a lot of what ages us is the inefficiency of our heart. We lose our fitness as we get older.
Yeah.
Well, if you just throw in a mechanical heart, you can be as youthful as you want to be for as long as possible.
Well, I want to talk about that. I've got when I was thinking about this story, I actually started thinking about that. But if I go back a little bit before that, typically people are in hospital, laying in a hospital bed, and they might be able to get up and move around a little bit in hospital. But you can imagine anyone that's had a cast on, I've had a broken arm, and you have a cast on for a little bit of time, and you take that off and your muscle's gone in
that's right.
no time at all. So if you wait in hospital for any period of time, that was they found with this particular person, once he got out, he could then exercise, stay fit and healthy. So when he did go in for his heart transplant, much better rate of success when you've got a fit, healthy person going in rather than someone that couldn't be so fit and healthy.
So I've got to assume if you're lying in hospital, you're not spending a lot of energy, so a heart can just pump at a regular rhythm. But if you're out and about, you need different pressures in your blood as you're doing different activities. So that heart's got to respond to it.
So this is interesting. This particular person struggled to walk a few feet before he was completely out of breath with his old heart because obviously it wasn't getting blood around. New heart in, he could start to walk around and move around, even doing strenuous physical activity. So then I started to think a little bit, and this is my philosophical question. I don't know the answer, but I started to think, I know when I do exercise and I know I look at my maximum heart rate based on my age, 220 minus your age is not 100% accurate, but it gives you a guide. And I've noticed when I go for strenuous bike rides or bike races, the maximum heart rate I can achieve has slowly come down over the years, which happens with age. And then I thought, well, if that wasn't my limit, if the heart beating wasn't my limit, could I achieve higher performance if something was there? So what is the limit in my body? So let's say I take away the limitation of my heart and I can now pump blood through much faster. What is the limit to my body? Are you telling
me that the Olympic Committee is going to have a whole new kettle of fish to have to
maybe
to sort out? I mean, there was enough with all that's going on now with drugs and trans people and all that sort of stuff. Now, is that heart your own? Were you born with that heart?
That's right. So I started to think about it. Obviously, gas exchange with our lungs is an issue. So we're moving blood around faster. Let's say the blood is being pumped at the equivalent of a 240 beats per minute heart with a robotic heart or a magnetic levitating rotor heart.
Now, sorry, stop there. Are you sure that there's beats per minute? Do you have a pulse?
No, well, you don't, but the equivalent of. So
the equivalent of,
I'm
sorry.
Thinking,
Gotcha.
Let's say your heart's up to 240 beats per minute.
Well, that would be freaky enough
flow.
As it is. It's just this guy's got no pulse.
Well, we've got no.
Watch him go.
Exactly. Let's check your pulse. Sorry. So, yeah.
You did.
So let's assume the blood's flowing as quickly as it would be with 240 beats per minute. You've got gas exchange. So how quick are our lungs underutilised, or are they just the right level? So I don't know. I have no idea the answer. Blood vessels, how thick, how much pressure could they sustain? Do they start bursting when we start pumping it through faster?
Right, yeah.
Our muscle cells, I mean, lactic acid, can we get rid of that? Like heat. Heat's a big issue. I know when I've been exercising in high heat in strenuous environments, you start to feel like you're overheating. So I don't know, even with our nervous system, how quickly can we fire our muscles? How quickly can you say to our muscles, okay, move the next pedal stroke on a bike, for example? So I don't know any of that, but there's a whole range of things there. Maybe our body's designed in perfect synchronicity so that all of our parts are designed to work together.
Did you say our body's designed? It hasn't evolved?
Well,
that's a whole other discussion there, Matthew. Let's just pull up on that.
Okay, our current state of our body maybe
evolved
in perfect synchronicity.
Thank you.
So that all of the parts work together. And if you have an extra bonus in one area,
I don't reckon that's the case. I reckon we've got still places to go, and medical science could take us down that road.
So the big issue, of course, is that unlike Iron Man with his arc reactor, I think it was called, wasn't it?
Yep, that thing in his chest, that'll do me.
Which I think was driven by palladium to begin with, but maybe they made up some other
Vibranium.
Vibranium, probably, who knows. But we haven't got that. So the downside with this is this person's got to have a battery strapped around their abdomen. And you'd want to make sure you remember to charge it.
Yeah, there's that.
Because you wouldn't wake up in the morning and go, I forgot to charge it. You wouldn't wake up in the morning.
Left the charger at home.
That's right. So I'm sure they've got a system where they've got a couple of batteries and they can swap it over and all sorts of things there. But it obviously worked for him and moved around in the outside world and just did what he did from day to day. Quite incredible. But it might get to that stage where they reduce the battery size enough or batteries become efficient enough that you could plug this in.
The charging happens from your biochemistry inside your body. Wouldn't that be something?
That'd be cool. That's an interesting one. But I also thought about where do the cables go in to the heart? So you've got a battery strapped to your stomach, on the outside of your stomach, and somewhere you've got some leads.
You've got to look a little bit like Iron Man with some wires
leads
going in. Yeah.
Anyway, great Australian invention, and I just think it's fantastic that we're getting to that point where we can solve so many of our medical issues.
Now, our next story comes straight out of the files of James Bond. Here at Tech Talk, we love our EVs, and an emerging powerhouse in the field known as Regent has taken the technology and cranked it up to 11 on the dial. Regent have made a Seaglider that's part boat, part hydrofoil, part plane. Matt, this is going to shake the baddies off your tail for sure.
The first question I had was why? Like, it just seems overly complicated, doesn't it? We want a flying car.
If you've got to make a getaway and you're living in Monaco and you're down by the docks there, you've just got to get in that boat and then turn into a hydrofoil and then fly off.
It does sound like a James Bond movie.
Spectre will be left in your wake.
That's right. So it is. It's all three. So it's a boat. It floats along like a normal boat and can go along at about 30 kilometres an hour with, at this stage, about 12 passengers. So it's not designed to be large yet, but they've got plans for other larger ones. And then if you want to go a bit faster, and maybe it's a bit choppy, maybe you don't like the wave structure at the moment, you just go a bit faster and go up onto the hydrofoils. So just like hydrofoils, we see them with America's Cup yachts, we see them in a whole range of different boats. It just sits up a little bit above the water on the hydrofoils and goes along at about 80 kilometres an hour, mainly because you're reducing that friction.
Yeah.
But you can still get maybe a bit rough weather, or maybe you just want to go a bit faster again. So then you just go a bit faster, and then you've got your wings.
Gotta leave that chop behind.
And you go along at about 290 kilometres an hour, but only about 10 metres above the water. So you don't take off like a normal plane. So it's very specific in that it's designed for commutes on water that are maybe longer, not like a Sydney Harbour commute.
Or just showing off.
Or just showing off. Maybe that's it. Come and look at my boat that does lots of cool stuff. But Sydney Harbour, I think, will be too small for it because you're not going long enough distance. But if you're hopping between islands, I've been to Fiji, for example, and there's lots of little islands around there. And you can take helicopter rides.
Or something like that.
Something that's it's still got a range. You're focused on Monaco, aren't you? You've still got a range of about 300 kilometres, so you can do a reasonable trip, but it's that sort of island hopping. Now, the focus for this particular company, Seaglider, talks about cheaper travel, which I found fascinating because I thought it sounds like you're just going to get there fast, which often is dearer rather than cheaper. But they say that you can do so many trips in one session.
People might want to get from Manly to Circular Quay in 5 minutes instead of, 25 or 35 or 45, whatever it is now.
I just wondered about the amount of traffic on Sydney Harbour, and you start to have this thing going on at 300 kilometres an hour.
Just get out of the way.
You got this ferry going along. Hold on, we've got a Seaglider coming out 300 k's an hour. What are we going to do? Maybe they limit it to hydrofoiling over there. So it does sound pretty cool. It looks fascinating. It's got 6 propellers on each side of the wing. So it's got 2 big wings that hang out. And
not short of a propeller.
Sorry?
It's not short of a propeller.
No, it's not short of a propeller. It's very much got enough propellers, which is good.
6 on each wing, did you say?
6 on each wing, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
And they say it's quiet, which with that many propellers you'd think not, but obviously they can probably spin them a bit slower to get the thrust they need. It's got a little buoy at the end of each wing. It just hangs down into the water. So it looks quite fascinating. But I don't know. I wonder about it. The other thing that's interesting is you don't need a pilot's license to fly it.
Oh.
So in commercial operation, you just need a particular license or particular skills. Well, I don't even know if it needed a boating license because it's meant to be done through automation. So you just got to have someone in the cockpit that says go and stop. Something
that they've cut off the back of a cereal packet, literally.
Well, maybe. They say it's as simple as steering a boat. You just go speed and direction. That's it. And apparently, and I don't quite understand this, they stay close to the water because you've got a wing-in ground effect. There's a cushion of air between the craft and the water. So it's not relying on a normal wing to fly. It's relying on the cushion of air between the water and the wing.
Okay, so
I don't quite understand the difference between that and a normal wing on a propeller, on a plane.
And why didn't they go for the traditional wing to get that differential between high and low pressure?
And why didn't you just go like a seaplane where you just take off? Maybe part of it is because then you've got to have a pilot's license. Maybe part of that was that. So it's fascinating. They've got demo flights That's why I hesitated there. Is it a flight? Is it what is it? Is it a trip? So
sorry, let's call it a test flight, but only with secret agents with a 00 number.
Correct, that's right, at this stage. But they say they'll have commercial activity with this. There'll be people out there maybe by 2027. So you'll be able to go and get on one of these. They've got companies that are ordering these already. They've got about $600 million worth of orders for these already. So people obviously see it's attractive. And I imagine it would be more those islands where you want to get from island to island quickly rather than around Manly.
So not across Burrendong Dam or Windermere Dam or Copeton Dam.
Oh, that'd be cool as well, wouldn't it?
West,
but how do you get it there? Because you can't fly it there in the first place. So that's a bit of a pain. It looks fascinating.
Well, from James Bond to Tony Stark now, the competition is well and truly cooking in the realm of AR glasses. Now, Snap is a company up to its 5th generation of smart glasses already. Matt, what does Snap spectacles do now that's a step up from the previous models?
Well, the unfortunate part is we can't buy them yet. They're only...
So they're at the 5th generation and you couldn't buy generations 1, 2, 3 or 4?
No, only if you're a developer. You could be a developer. Okay. You could agree to pay $99 per month, $99 US, per month for 12 months, minimum 12 months, and you can be a developer. Obviously, what they're trying to do is they're trying to encourage the development community to get out there and start to develop a whole range of things for them.
Gotcha.
They're making them better as they go, and then the developers are probably saying, can we have this feature? Can we change that? Can we add this on? The new 5th generation does better tracking of your location through GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite System, rather than GPS.
Right.
So GNSS is a little bit more accurate. It's also got compass heading. So you've got things like custom mapping direction features, which you didn't have before, but you've also got a virtual keyboard. And I thought, a keyboard, what do I do? Do I have to point my eyes at a certain spot? But you use hand gestures in front of the glasses.
So you get a keyboard coming up and you just dot.
Yeah, in front of your glasses. So it would look very strange looking at someone down the street who's out there with their hand. I mean, I do see some people like this sometimes, but I assume they're affected by drugs. So these people are there with their hands typing on a keyboard that's sitting in front of them in a virtual world.
Wow.
The whole point at this stage is to get the whole interaction between you and your environment to be seamless. So we've talked before about having some AR glasses and you're standing there outside the Louvre and you look out there and you go, here's some history on the Louvre, or you look at the Eiffel Tower. Don't know why I'm going to Paris, but we're in Paris apparently. And you look at the Eiffel Tower and it gives you the history of the Eiffel Tower, etc. So that sounds fascinating, but the better you can get with your location, the better you can get some of that information delivered to you. So that all sounds quite fascinating. One of the things I think is great, I sometimes when you go to a big tourist attraction, you'll get the headphones that you'll plug in and you walk around and you don't have a person guiding you anymore. There's headphones guiding you. It's not that friendly when you go there with a family because you've all got the headphones on and you're all listening to different parts of it and you can't interact that well. But that would be the perfect example where you could have these on and it could be giving you information, telling you about a whole range of things, putting it up on the glasses or just feeding it to you with an audio process. But again, wherever you go, not just the big tourist attractions that have that audio sort of process, audio guide set up, it would be wherever you go. You go down to your local pub and you look at that and it'll give you the history of the local pub, even though not many people out there might know that. They mightn't have invested the time to put a whole bunch of information out there. Yeah. But you could just hear or see that information. So I'm keen to see it happen. We've got Meta, we know, are working on their glasses. Orion, their glasses they're working on. We know Apple, they haven't made any announcements, but they're rumoured to have some AR smart glasses. So with Snap and Meta and Apple, surely someone's got to get to that point. And it happens quickly. We talked about many years ago, I remember doing some stuff around watches, smartwatches that were just starting out and they'll have some few basic features and you had to have your phone nearby to be able to use Bluetooth, and then they got to the stage where they could work independent of your phone. And now we talk about wearable smartwatches. It's just everyone's got one, surely. It's just second nature. So it's all new and exciting at the moment. How long before it's just, it's almost not do you have, it's do you have Meta or
which one
Apple
do you
or
have?
Or Snap. So it's happening quickly, and I think it's pretty cool. I think the Google glasses didn't go that well, but they were maybe a bit too early for the technology.
And it was too early for the market. I think people weren't ready to wear glasses. Maybe they were a good product, a better product than the sales that they go on.
Yeah, possibly. And I think probably the battery life is one of the big things.
Yeah.
As batteries get developed to be better and better, I think it's getting to that point where maybe now is almost the time where you can get something that's small enough with long enough battery life, and also that ubiquitous fast connection. 5G's got to help in all of this as well, because you want those faster connections to be able to just have that information come to you automatically without having to go through and wait for that to happen. So maybe now is the time. Maybe Google Glasses were just too early for the technology that was available.
Now, one of the drawbacks of AI web research has been up to this point that AI engines have treated all information as equal. Now, if the last decade has taught us anything, it should be that in the age of information, that there are many different definitions to the term research, and that they are not all equal. Matt, ChatGPT and Gemini are getting smarter about their searches. Is that right?
Look, it's pretty cool. I've actually been playing with this a lot this last week because I was really interested to see how good a job it did. One of the complaints I've often made about generative AI is that it goes and searches the internet.
Yes.
And people joke about it in the past. Oh, my mum came in and said, how do I download the internet? And, oh, you can't do that, mum, it's too big. But the problem with the internet is that, as you alluded to, any person with any random idea, someone that walks down the street and types on a keyboard in the middle of their screen and in the middle of their air, whatever random ideas they've got, they can put it on the internet and then it's out there. Yeah. Now, at least in the old days when we had newspapers, I'm not saying that newspapers or media people got everything perfect, but there was some training. They had some sort of journalistic training, maybe a degree or some sort of on-the-job training. And then when they'd write an article, it would be checked by an editor, sub-editor maybe. And then sometimes they'd say, I'm not sure about this. We better get our legal team to look at this and just check out that. When you read that story in the newspaper, again, it may not have been perfect, but you knew there was some
checks and balances.
Some checks and balances, some rigour to the process. Same with when something was on radio or on TV. Yeah. There'd be some check process to get through to get to that point where it was now broadcast, as opposed to now.
If it was broadcast information, it had some merit to it, potentially. But as you said, there were some people who did get it wrong.
Yeah, that's right. And again, that was the minority. But now anyone can put any idea up there and it's out there and it's written down, so it must be true.
People repost it.
That's right. They keep sharing it. So when generative AI researches its information, research inverted commas there, then it looks at all that information on the internet and drags it out and says, here's the information I've got. But it doesn't really know what's incorrect, what's misinformation, what's correct. It can do a couple of checks and try and do what other people do, but if it's lots of references out there, the same thing, sometimes it can get that wrong. So when I use generative AI and just look at something, and I'm tending to use it now instead of Google just to look up something, I go, just do a little bit of common sense check on that. Does it seem right? Yeah, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Or not sure, and then you go and question it. The new deep research tool, which is available in both Gemini and ChatGPT, it says, I'm going to do this job properly for you. You give me a question, I need 10 minutes, okay? It's not instant like every other search is. 10 minutes, which seems like an eternity for a search, but what it does, and you can watch it. So I've done a couple of things in the last week, which I actually needed some information. So I had to go and research. There was one, I was researching a product that I needed for a particular job, and I knew there were a few products out there, and I'd done a little bit of research myself. And then I went, you know what, I'm going to test out this deep research. So I gave it exactly the problem I was trying to address, and this is what the client needs and all the rest of the information. And I gave to it. And then it came back and said, okay, to clarify, can you give me... So it asked a few questions, and I went through and answered those. Went, great. Yeah. And they said, leave with me. And I went, I'd heard it took about 10 minutes. So I went and did some other things, but I watched it then. And down the right-hand side, it was telling me what it was doing. It was researching this site. It was asking this question of this particular site. So you could see all the different sites. It went to 50, 60 different sites to get the information. And then what was interesting was it came back and it gave me maybe a 10-page report, which was almost too long. I don't want that much detail in that. But the recommendations it gave me for the products were a couple of the products that I'd said, here are some similar products. So I put the acid on it. I said, so have you just been lazy? Have you been so lazy you've just taken a couple of products that I recommended and you just researched those and you haven't researched the entire market? And it was quite polite. It said, well, you're right to question me on that, Matthew. You're right to call me out. And it would have been easy to do that, because if you gave that to a staff member and said, go and research these, these are the ones I found, well, the obvious thing that staff member would do would be to start with those three.
Yes, yeah.
But Chat said, when I've looked at that, it's a fairly limited market in the Australian market for those products. So those 3 that you found already were logical ones out there. I found another couple of ones there, and away it went and went through it all. And then, of course, being as nice as chat was, it said, it actually is an indication of your good research skills that you came up with those 3 companies in the first place. So
it's buttering you up to then deliver you whatever it wants to. Yeah, no, got you.
So I felt very nice about myself. But then I said, right, that's fantastic. Now give me a summary and your recommendation. Because I think ChatGPT is a bit like the two-handed accountant. It says on one hand you could do this, on the other hand you could do that.
Yeah, okay.
And so I like to actually put the hard word on chat sometimes and say, give me your recommendation. Tell me what you think, even though, are you really thinking? I don't want to get into that discussion, but yeah. So it came back and gave me a pretty clear definition. If this is what you want to do, this is the product to choose. If this is what you want to do, this is the product to choose. All that work that was done, and by the end of that process, probably 20 minutes in the end, I reckon that was, if I gave that to one of my staff members and they took 2 days to do it, I think that was pretty reasonable. If they took 3 days, I go, yeah, okay, you took a bit longer than I thought, but because there's a lot of work in doing all that, you're making phone calls, you're researching on the net, you're checking out whether this one does this particular thing, and so you're going through that. There's a lot of work in researching for a product compared to looking at that. So I was pretty impressed by it. So Gemini does it, ChatGPT does it. Most importantly, when it gives you the full report, it gives you all the references. So those sites at the end,
cross-checked.
Yes, that's
whereas
right.
they weren't letting you cross-check in the past.
Correct. It was just coming up with information, and there it is. So you can go through and you can click on some of those links, and if one says some
Flat Earth Society?
Flat Earth Society, that's perfect. Then you probably go, okay, maybe I'd put a little bit less confidence in the information I got back.
Gotcha.
But it got all the references at the end. It goes through that, and so again, we've played around with generative AI in general in society. We're doing a few little things with it, having a bit of fun with it. But does it start to get to that stage where it's incredibly useful? Now we're putting all researchers out of a job. Are we going to see research assignments being handed in, just generated on ChatGPT? I hope not. But gee, as a tool to give us some direction and start us down the right path, what I did after I got this was essentially it narrowed it down to these 2 products for me. And then I went and did the old-fashioned research where I actually rang both of them and have a chat to both those companies to see which one I was most comfortable with to then give my final recommendations through to the client. So when you look at all of that, it probably just saved me a couple of days of work to then narrow down where it was. And I feel like I did the comprehensive research without having to spend the time to do the comprehensive research. So
there you go.
It's quite fascinating there.
Very fascinating indeed.
So go and have a look at it. I think in Gemini it's free still. There's a button there that says deep research. In chat you've got to be on the paid subscription one to be able to click deep research. But it's worth it just to try it for a month and just play around with it and see what you come up with. Yeah.
In China, an interesting technological revolution is taking place. It's an odd sort of marriage of sorts between high-speed rail and EV driving. Now, Matt, how do very fast trains account for increasing EV sales in China?
Now, is this a classic example where you see some research and you go, there's an obvious link between those two?
Causation, correlation.
Exactly right. Is it just a coincidence? Is it really linked? So what they found in China, a couple of things in China. First of all, I'll just give you a quick couple of bits of stats. So in 2024, about 45% of new car sales in China were EVs.
Yeah, that's a big take-up, right?
That is. European Union saw about 25%, the US 11%, and we were down around 7.4%, which isn't too bad. We know we've been slowly climbing there, but we're still single digit. Now, when they started to look at it more, they found that various locations that were serviced by high-speed rail in China had a greater uptake of EVs. Now, when you start to break that down, it might have been a coincidence. And let's face it, China's got a big high-speed rail network, 45,000 kilometres of high-speed rail network, so biggest in the world. They've done well with high-speed rail. So you might say, well, it's just a coincidence. People in China are taking up EVs and there's lots of high-speed rail, so whatever. But when they broke it down, there were links, and it was actually, when they started to survey people, they found that there were some links there to the high-speed rail and EVs. Still, when you talk to people about their fears about getting an EV, why don't they want to get an EV, range anxiety is still a big issue. Now, you and I know that's not really that big an issue. There's a whole bunch of reasons why it's not. But for people that don't have one, to take that first leap of faith, that's the thing that scares them the most. In China, they found that people that have got high-speed rail network, that have got access to that in the locations they normally travel to, they're not travelling big distances. Why would you travel big distance at 100 kilometres an hour when you can go at 300, 350 kilometres an hour? So people in China were tending to buy EVs to do short commutes, to do small trips, maybe to go to the train station where they got on the fast train, or maybe just to go around their local environment. Anytime they went on a big trip, they weren't using a car regardless, because they were always using high-speed rail. Much smarter to go and do that. So they found that two things happened. One, people in China were buying cars when they could just do those small trips, but also Chinese manufacturers had a range of models, including ranges of models that were short distance and much cheaper, because he didn't need the big battery on them. So they might be making cars that only have a 200-kilometre range. In Australia, which 200 kilometres, that's terrible. Yeah. I can't get to the next town with 200 kilometres. For people in China, 200 kilometres, when am I ever going to drive 200 kilometres in one go? Because I've only got to drive down the train station or into town, and it might be 30 or 40 kilometres. So
that kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
It does make sense.
Yeah.
So what's the solution? Well, let's build high-speed rail. Well,
no
if we build high-speed rail, then we'll have better uptake of EVs. Obviously, that's not a valid solution. In the US, maybe, and there are some things in the US. They've got a $12 billion line that's underway at the moment from LA to Las Vegas. So there are some projects in the US, but again, you just got that population density in China that makes so much sense to have high-speed rail in so many places. So maybe we've got to keep developing battery technology. Maybe we've got to keep getting those longer range cars. Maybe people have just got to try it. Go and hire one. When you go away somewhere, just hire one and see if it's really that big an issue, if you're really that scared about it in the first place. But again, it seems like in China, I think they're really going to be leading the world in EV uptake. And we've talked about it before, that Chinese car manufacturers are really shaking up the traditional, often European or American manufacturers, and they're going to keep doing that. As they keep developing those short-range cars, they'll probably keep developing long-range cars. But it's quite fascinating, the linkage between EVs and high-speed rail.
Now, anyone with an Alexa sitting in their kitchen bench at home may or may not be pleased to hear about the latest development for voice-operated assistants. Amazon are upgrading Alexa to a smarter, more personalised assistant, but Matt, nothing in this world is free, of course, and I say free in many different senses of the word.
Indeed. This is all part of the whole competition with AI. So you've got Alexa at the moment. Alexa Plus launched in the US on the 28th of March. So not available in Australia yet, but Alexa Plus has already launched. When people are listening to this, they've already launched in the US. So a few things that are better about it, but it really is about that whole competition. You've got Siri, obviously, where you're trying to get more AI. Apple's trying to build more AI into Siri. Yeah. Google Assistant. So Alexa Plus is saying, we've got to be in there as well. We've got to be making sure that we're not just telling dad jokes when someone asks for a joke on Alexa. We need to be a bit better. We need to be doing a bit more research and be able to come up with better information, which is fine. I love the competition. I love the fact that they're all competing and trying to get that better. So you've got ChatGPT, you've got Gemini, you've then over on the other side, you've got the assistants that are trying to get better with their AI. And so there's a whole bunch of AI competition. Who'll be the winner out of all this? I don't know. I can't tell you at the moment. But at the moment, Alexa probably hasn't been the number one assistant that's been out there. It's been good. It's been fun, but I don't know if it's been number one. But they're trying to address it, obviously. So this one, they're trying to make smarter. They're trying to make more personalised. And one thing they're doing is they're giving it individual voice ID recognition so that you can have a bunch of people in a household and it will fine-tuned to each individual user. So
well, that'd be great, because my wife often asks for the timer to stop and she just won't listen. Sorry, not my wife, but Alexa. And so we're yelling at it, please stop.
Well, theoretically, with your own voice recognition, you could say, you as an individual could ask it to do something, and then your wife could ask to do something. It would say, I know this voice from this voice. I'll respond in different ways depending on what I'm meant to do.
Well, I think maybe the voice recognition's already there, that she can hear. Alexa registers the timer to go on, but doesn't want to listen when the timer's going off.
There might be a whole range of other issues there as well. So,
we'll move on. Sorry, I'm a distractor.
The other thing that was interesting, in the US on some of their devices, you had the option, not all their devices, because some devices needed to send information to the cloud, but they had the option on some devices, do not send voice recordings. So when you tick that, if you had a device that didn't need to go to the cloud to process information, it didn't send that. I'm okay with information being sent to the cloud by various companies because I want to be using that for more training. But some people are very concerned about that, and that's fine. So again, in the US, you had that option, but that option with Alexa Plus won't be there anymore because it's going to have to process some of this information in the cloud. So people are very worried about privacy. They can go and look at all the privacy information from Amazon and make sure they see what Amazon say about privacy and how they protect it and how they encrypt that data, etc. But some people might be worried about the fact that that particular button is gone now going forward with Alexa Plus. So interesting, but I do love the competition. I do love the fact that you've got these different providers trying to compete on this same space, and ultimately we, hopefully as consumers, win out in all of this. And I suppose you still feel some comfort in the fact that people are still checking on some of those privacy issues. And you might remember a couple of years ago, Amazon paid out about $30 million because they had some violations with Alexa and Ring storing children's data. So that was a bit of an issue for them. And also they had some claims they actually settled some claims where, again, no one was at fault, but claims were settled about employees viewing private Ring footage, Ring being the doorbell that's owned by Amazon.
Gotcha, yeah.
So that's sort of stuff where you might be concerned about Amazon, but again, they're trying to address that. So you've just got to look at their privacy information and see if you're comfortable with all of that.
And just for those people who are listening to this podcast on a speaker right now, our apologies for keeping on mentioning these names of these companies because it's been throwing your little devices in. But anyway, Alexa, set a timer for 13 minutes, please. A small rural village in India is on its way to becoming an internet phenomenon. It started with some creative tinkering on YouTube by a couple of friends with a camera, but pretty soon the whole village caught the bug, and it's proving to be quite lucrative, Matt.
It is proving quite lucrative, and I love the fact that you've just got a village. Now, this has got 4,000 residents. Now, in Australia, we'd call 4,000 residents not a bad sized little town. There's lots of towns out there that have got that sort of number.
That's right.
But when you've got 1.3 billion people in your population, 4,000 is a dot. And obviously for some of these villages, income or standard of living is very low. So working out other ways to generate some income, other ways to sell products or just generate some money in the first place is important, but also a small amount of money can make a huge amount of difference. So you're right, in Tulsi, it's a small rural village in central India, and they basically had a couple of people there who started doing a bit of stuff on some digital content. So they did one where they just addressed some social issues, they put a bit of humour in there, and suddenly, and you never know why this sort of thing happens, but that went viral. They got about millions, hundreds of millions of views on that, and then some subsequent videos they posted. 125,000 subscribers are now subscribing to this channel. Now, they're not earning big bucks in the scheme of things, but for this village, it's big bucks. So they're earning about 560 Australian dollars per month. Now, in a small village,
that's pretty good.
That's right. That's significant. That can buy a lot of things for that small village. So the village got onto it. The village said, we can actually help and get lots of people in our village, become a YouTube village almost. So the local government installed a state-of-the-art video production studio to help all these people that are going out in this creator community. So a couple of friends started off, but now they're talking about the fact that the whole village has got a YouTube-driven economy. Now, we talked about YouTube a little bit over the last couple of weeks because
this is amazing.
We've got the 20th anniversary of YouTube, which we talked about last week. But again, it's brought forward a few different things that I've found just looking for different things around YouTube, because you look at how many different ways YouTube has impacted the community. So this is fantastic. But then you start to talk about across India a whole range of other people that have started doing some YouTube things, started getting a little bit of production, just people at college, people in other villages, even people that have started off doing some things with YouTube and just showing off what they want to do, and then real film production studios start saying
that people want their business and they want to take them on as the face of whatever they're doing.
And I suppose I think of some music artists, and I'm sure Justin Bieber is one of these, but I probably should research this before I talk about it.
No, I think he was. Yeah, I think he was discovered on YouTube.
The beauty of it is, in the old days, if you wanted to be discovered as a muso, you'd do your demo tape up and you'd drop that off at hundreds of different places to try and get there, or put it at radio stations and hope that someone would listen to it. And how many of those music companies, those big music companies, the Sonys of the world, for example, would receive hundreds of those, and how did you get yours to the top of the pile? And the first 5 seconds of that song had to be good enough to grab their attention, whereas now if you can go and create it yourself, if you can go and get some viewers, some listeners, and then suddenly you go along to a studio and say, well, I've already got 5 million subscribers. Are you interested in taking me on? Oh, yeah, absolutely. So again, it's the way that the Justin Biebers of the world can be discovered, but also the way people with various talents can be discovered. It's not any longer about maybe if you've got enough money, or if you had enough money in the past, you might be able to go and hire a recording studio and then get your demo tape done, whereas now it might just be if you're good enough,
well,
you'll be discovered.
Location. It used to be if you weren't living in a spot or didn't have access to get to a spot where someone could hear you.
Yep.
And here we've got these people living in India in a small rural village that have been able to latch onto something that's really, really big.
The other thing is that there are some people producing videos that are really challenging some of the norms, challenging some of the gender norms that might be in India, some of the religious norms. And again, you probably didn't have an opportunity to do that in the past. You couldn't go and get some of that information published in a newspaper because that newspaper might have been worried about the impression it gave to readers. Whereas now, if people have their opinion, they want to put it out there, they've got that ability via YouTube. It really started to go off a lot of this during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, but also when TikTok was banned in India. It really made YouTube a really good platform to go and take that on. So I do love it. I do love how much you're seeing YouTube basically help some of these different areas across the world, but also then get people to take the next step into what you would call, I suppose, the mainstream production of video. So, yeah, fascinating stuff.
Yeah, fascinating. The French motoring icon Renault has trekking to the summit of Mount EV. And they're planting, I'm going to start that again. The French motoring icon Renault are trekking to the summit of Mount EV and planting le tricolore, as I think how they say the French flag, at every camp along the way. I'm having a shocker. The Renault Turbo is back, folks. That's the long and the short of my intro right now. It's EV this time, and it does 0 to 100 in a blink of an eye. Matt, this thing is really set to tear up the Champs-Élysées.
I love the fact that a lot of these companies, these car companies, are saying, let's go back and retro, or be a bit retro, and look at what was in the past. Now,
so this is an old rally model, isn't it?
Yeah. Back in 1980, Renault released their hot hatch. Now, when I say hot hatch, it was 0 to 100 in 7.5 seconds and topped out at 190 kilometres an hour, which is a bit irrelevant because you're way past the speed limit. But that was back in 1980, and then when they really became well known, it was a bit of a boxy shape, and when they became really well known was when they took on the rallying world, and that was the vehicle to have back in the rallying day. Yeah. That was the one that was smashing all the rally championships. So Renault became very well known for that. I had a little
matchbox version of it myself.
There you go. Yeah. So, and it was a kind of almost like a little cargo vehicle, a little kind of
that's
So
right.
it was a little tiny hot hatch, and it almost probably started off that whole phase of hot hatches, little cars that were small but really powerful, because before that you had to have a big car with a big engine to have a powerful, fast car, but then they brought in these small cars that were really cool. So Renault said, that was a cool car, let's go and see if we can show off our new EV credentials. And sometimes car companies are looking at how they make money out of EVs and how they transition. Some are doing it with mainstream, trying to come up with mainstream cars. Other ones, like this one, are saying, let's make it a bit special. And some of those old fans that we had from back 40-odd years ago, who might be a little bit older, have a little bit more money now, maybe retired and want to relive their youth, let's give them something. So they've released only 1,980 of this new model. Obviously, a link back to 1980.
Got to be quick.
And I hope they sell them all. If they do, they'll generate a bit of money for the company because they're selling them at around $260,000 Australian.
Wow.
So they're making it quite significant. But they're saying this just makes the old Renault Turbo that everyone thought was pretty cool a bit of a joke. It does 0 to 100 in 3.5 seconds. It's got 4,800 newton meters of torque, 400 kilowatts of power. Again, a bit irrelevant, tops out at 270 kilometres an hour. But they've actually done really well to keep the weight down. Often with EVs, they're fairly heavy because you've got all that battery. They've kept it at 1.45 tonnes because they've mainly made it out of carbon fibre. So it's a pretty cool vehicle. It does about 400 kilometre range, but I don't guess if you're buying this car, you're buying it for the range. I guess you're buying it to go down the main street. It just wouldn't make enough noise down the main street. I think that's the only problem for it. So it's pretty cool. Whether Renault thinks this is the way forward for them to make little exclusive cars or they're just dipping the toe in, with this one
Just to
say
see what happens?
Yeah, and then maybe get
taking
more
one of their
mainstream.
classic models,
But I think we'll see more of this. I think we'll see more. We've talked about the VW Combi before, an old classic car that was great back in the 60s. But
getting the EV makeover.
Yeah, so I think we'll see more and more of this. But it sounds pretty cool. I'm not going to go and buy one, but I think it sounds like pretty cool. I wouldn't mind taking one for a drive.
All right, now here's something I only just learned about. Apparently our moon is loaded with helium, folks. And not just any helium, but the isotope called helium-3. Now, this is going to make for some sort of big party balloon. But helium-3 is very rare on Earth. Apparently very useful, though, and therefore worth a mint load of cash. Enough cash to warrant maybe mining operations, Matt. So mining the moon is about to become a real thing.
It might be becoming a real thing.
And this is the thing, is that your payload is actually going to be possibly make the transport vehicle lighter when it comes back to the Earth's atmosphere.
The payload's not going to be much, though, is it? But let's just go back a bit. So when we say we're going to buy a bottle of helium because we've got a party coming up on the weekend and we want to blow up balloons and then we want to talk with a funny high voice afterwards, we all say helium, but you're really saying helium-4.
That's right.
If you want to be a nerd at your next kid's birthday party, say, pass me the helium-4 bottle and I'll go and blow up some helium.
2 protons, 2 neutrons.
Correct. So helium-3 is an isotope that's got 2 protons and 1 neutron. Now, that's a bit of an issue because it doesn't really occur that much. And to give you an idea of the helium we have around Earth that we can just go and grab and put in our helium bottles, about 99.99986% is helium-4 and 0.00014% is helium-3. Well, we don't care that much, you would think, because who wants helium-3? Well, it turns out we do want helium-3. We want helium-3 for 2 good reasons. It's used in nuclear fusion, which we're still not quite there with yet, but that's the holy grail of nuclear reactors. Rather than fission, we want to use fusion, and also quantum computing. So 2 things that will make a significant difference to this planet. If we can get those 2 things right, fusion and quantum computing separately, not necessarily linked, then we need a bit more helium-3. At the moment, if you've got a bit of spare helium-3 laying around, well, get it on the market because it's worth about $20 million per kilogram.
Wow.
So I don't know many people have that sitting in their backyard just waiting to be picked up. So that's the bit of the issue. So you say, well, what the heck? Just go and make a bit of helium-3. You've got enough helium-4 out there. Go and make a bit of helium-3. Well, that's a bit of an issue because it normally uses a nuclear reaction or a huge amount of power.
So I've got to undergo beta decay. It's a tritium atom that needs to undergo beta decay. So getting technical there? Yeah. So
doing that, again, you either want a huge amount of power or you want a nuclear reaction. So it's not that easy to just take a bit of helium-4 and your next birthday party, I'm just going to turn this into helium-3. Not quite that easy.
Can't, no.
So what do we do about it? Well, we keep looking for it on Earth, which, as we talked about, it's very rare, or we go to the moon because apparently the moon has got a reasonable amount, still not flush with helium-3, but compared to Earth, a reasonable amount. So when you start to think about that, you start to think about the cost of going to the moon and doing a bit of mining and bringing it home. That's all fairly expensive, which gives you an idea of how valuable helium-3 might be. But what do you do? I mean, I know miners that, as in not miner, ORS, ERS, not young people. I know people who work in mines that might do a 7-day on, 7-day off, or a 10-day on, 5-day off type of routine or schedule. Well, what do you do with the moon? Do you send guys up there for 10 days on and 5 days off?
Lunches.
That's right. Just the transport alone. I mean, do you say you're 10 days off, or that's taken up with travelling back to Earth and then turn around and get back on the next one going up?
I wonder if this is something that robots couldn't do.
Quite possibly. There's actually been a $375,000 grant from the US Department of Energy that's been given to Interloon, who is basically a company that's looking at this whole process. So it's serious. It's not just a random idea by someone. It's someone doing some serious research. And their first mission, Prospect Moon, is going to go up there about 2027 just to see whether or not there can be enough. So they're going to take some samples and have a look at that. They're going to send up a mechanical processor, a mass spectrometer, a multispectral imager to look at the actual soil there to see whether or not it's actually got enough in it. So apparently there's more helium-3 on the Earth's surface due to solar wind exposure. So apparently it gets embedded in the surface then, so it might be mineable. But the estimation at this stage, before we've done enough sampling, is that you would need to go through 150 tonnes of lunar soil to get about 1 gram of helium-3.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
are you going to load up 150 tons on some sort of spacecraft and bring it back to Earth? Probably not. So then you're starting
Unless
to do...
you're making, well, yeah, I guess you're talking about $24 million a kilo is, yeah, probably not.
But you might put some operations on there that will take that and
Yeah,
go
processing it
through
while
that
you're up there.
150 tons on the moon. Then you get all sorts of other interesting areas. Some people are saying, well, let's not destroy the environment of the moon because we've done a fair bit of that on the Earth with mining. But then other people have said, well, no one lives there, so who cares about the environment of the moon? Who cares if we destroy it? So that's an issue. But the other part is, who owns the moon?
Yeah.
Who owns the mining
Who's got
rights
rights to
the
it?
moon? You can just imagine some, I don't know, United Nations or solicitors somewhere rubbing their hands together saying, right, this is a whole big issue for us to work out. You send a company up there, you do some mining there, you come back at your $20 million per kilo, and then, well, we'll take our royalties. Well, I don't owe you royalties because who says you own the moon? So maybe someone goes up there and plants a flag on it and says, we've now taken control, we're protecting the moon.
Well, we
It's
know there's
ours.
at least one flag up there already. But, there's a lot to be argued out in the courts there.
A whole lot of stuff. I mean, the practicality of it for a start,
Yeah.
but once you get past the technical side, as so often happens, we talk about here on Tech Talk, is that you get the legal processes have to catch up
Yeah.
to the technical process. No one's really thought about this yet, but if someone sends that up in 2027 and says, yep, it's worthwhile doing it, we can do a round trip for $10 million, but we're going to bring back $40 million worth of stuff, then it's worth it. Then, wow, who owns that and how do you start to lay claim and do we start to have moon wars on there?
Watch this space, folks. That's our catch cry on Tech Talk.
It's quite fascinating where that'll go.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is pack up time. Please pop all your digital crayons into the tubs provided and make sure that all the virtual scrap paper finds its way in a bin. Thank you very much. This craft workshop is over for another week. And thanks for another cracking Tech Talk, Matt.
So deep research. I'm going to keep playing with that. I've got another client that wants some information on some different backup solutions, some in the cloud backup solutions. So I've got to go and chase that. But I'm a bit excited about
I'm going to
deep
go
research at the moment.
investigate getting a boat that can fly 10 metres above the water, and then I'm going to find a stretch that I can do that in.
At $300 an hour
And I'm going to buy myself a tuxedo and a little toy PP7.
and a license.
Thanks for tuning in once again to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk is 100% homegrown and hand-fed, free of added hormones and preservatives. I'm your host, James Eddy, bidding you a happy and productive week ahead until we meet again. In the meantime, take care and all the best to you.